I think there's a little too much short-term profit motivation right now, and not enough looking towards. We have to actually put in some effort to make sure that there is a future of this fan base and that it's just as passionate as the fans we have now.
Hey, welcome to Beat Everyone. I'm Ben Flanagan with AL.com, and with me is Beat Everyone producer Matt Scalici. And I want to start the show with some good vibes here, Matt. Y'all know our good friend, AL.com sports writer and columnist Michael Casagrande, been on the show many times, co-host of the Eli Gold version of this podcast. Michael just welcomed a new baby girl. We want to wish Michael congratulations. Shout out to the growing Casagrande family. So good news there, Matt.
Yeah, great. Love to hear it. Michael's one of my favorite people, and it's always nice to see good things happening to good folks. And Michael is it's one of those where it's like I've known him for a really long time, and he's got a very strange sense of humor. And now and if you have kids, Ben, you know that comes back to bite you in the end. Your kids get the weirdest and meanest part of your sense of humor, and they revisit it upon you. And I wish that for Michael.
Yeah, it's a new level of humility that you'll face head on. And
That's right.
Speaking of growing families, Matt, let's get to the show. So we know by now that Alabama ain't got no money, right? Like at least that's what the athletics program would at least have us believe right now. And bear with me for just a second here. In the age of NIL, the transfer portal, all these other challenges creating an even more cutthroat and competitive landscape in college football, Alabama athletics director Greg Byrne, he's made numerous public pleas to fans to support the program however they can financially, right? And in December, he issued this statement. We talked about it on the show via social media. He implored fans to donate to the Crimson Tide's Yay Alabama NIL Collective. He asked for, quote, Bama Nation to fight back against other schools, quote, using promises of $1 million paydays to entice UA players to transfer to their programs. The quote, fans will remember, I think he told the Next Round show, quote, I think there's an assumption that, hey, we're Alabama. We've got more money than the Vatican, and that's not accurate. We have a budget, and we have to adhere to that budget, end quote. I just want to share some numbers here, Matt. Alabama Athletics brought in $234.8 million in fiscal year 2024, but they spent $262.8 million according to its latest NCAA revenues and expenses report obtained by AL.com in an open records request. Our friend AL.com beat reporter Matt Stahl writes that that's more revenue than at least 10 other SEC schools, though you've got programs like Texas and Georgia with more. Texas had like 330 plus million in revenue, Georgia 241.8 million. And Byrne recently said that Alabama spends about $195,000 per year on each of its scholarship athletes. So, Matt Stahl also wrote this week that Alabama Athletics plans to add 40 scholarships across its sports following the House versus NCAA settlement's presumed approval this year. And so now this week, Matt, this brings us to the conversation we're about to have. Byrne went on a Fox News podcast, The Will Cain Show, to talk about college athletics and this new legislation that will change the rules on scholarships, roster construction, and maybe bring a new financial model a little bit closer to sports in college sports. And, this all stems from the NCAA settling an antitrust lawsuit, House versus NCAA, that I mentioned, to allow schools to pay athletes directly through a revenue sharing model. And this would eliminate scholarship limits in favor of eliminate scholarship limits in favor of roster limits, and essentially eliminate walk-ons. So, Byrne and Cain, they talked about Texas, and Byrne comes out again and he says, people think we're flush and we don't have the same financial flexibility as a program like Texas. Byrne said, quote, we've had some challenging conversations with some of our coaches saying, you're going to have this number of scholarships to work with. There will be schools that have more than you do. So, Matt, I'll start with this. Thanks for bearing with me. Part of running an athletics program like Alabama, it's fundraising, right? Like you need hundreds of millions of dollars to compete at the highest level. And Alabama has long been considered a football blue blood. They're competitive in a lot of sports, but the playing field is obviously getting that much more treacherous than it already was. Do you think Greg Byrne is just doing what most Power Five ADs are doing to stay competitive, or do these public pleas ring a little hollow to you?
I mean, I can't necessarily judge him against other ADs, first of all, because other than other than John Cohen at Auburn, I don't pay nearly as much attention to any other AD as I do to Greg Byrne. What I will say is it's definitely new for Alabama. And that's weird because we're now in an era where the way this all works is much more nakedly commercial. Like, we've never been closer to everyone just owning up to the fact that this is a business. This is not a charity. This is not a religion. And it's not any of the things that normally rely on donations from people who get nothing in return other than a warm feeling in their hearts. And I think that the look, if we're talking about success generating revenue, we're talking about paying the people who help you attain that success. Man, it sounds like a business to me. Sounds like a professional sports organization. I don't remember hearing Jerry Jones beg Cowboy fans to pony up extra money. I don't remember hearing any professional sports organization do that. And I understand that is still a gap between what college sports is and fully professional sports, but that gap is getting really, really small. It's becoming much more of an academic matter and a technicality. So my question is, why is Greg Byrne pretending that this is still just sort of a nonprofit organization, that this is just a thing that people should donate money to out of the goodness of their hearts?
Well, because Matt, I mean, they pay for everything else. They may as well pay for this too. You know, they spent their entire lives buying tickets and traveling and paying for hotels and paying for outrageous concession prices. So why wouldn't they just do this too, right? I mean, I guess my counter to that, Matt, is look, first of all, fans can spend their money however they want to.
Absolutely.
And
And to be clear, I have no criticism for somebody who wants to donate money to UA athletics. If that's what you
right.
want to do with your money, then great.
Yeah, and they should look. That's their choice, and if they feel like they're contributing to the success of Alabama athletics, more specifically football, then good on them. They feel like they've got a stake, a personal and financial stake in it. That's fine, but where else should they get it, Matt? I mean, if not from the fans, like where are they falling short when it comes to building this collective and putting themselves in the driver's seat to stay competitive when you have programs like Texas and Ohio State and Georgia who had more revenue than them in 2024 and have maybe a little bit more flexibility, as he was referring to. Where other than the fans and asking for money from them on Twitter or Facebook or on the Yay Alabama app or whatever you want to call it, like traditionally, where would athletics directors get these types of funds so that they wouldn't have to ask fans? And why do you think they feel like, why do you think Greg Byrne is in a position now to where he has to make this plea publicly to the people that he hasn't had to previously rely on?
Well, I think it's a matter of a shift from one model of operating to another. And so some schools have been able to make that shift more smoothly, and it seems like Alabama is having a little bit of a harder time with it. And what I mean is, uh, Alabama has always had a lot of revenue coming in, and some of that comes from donors, but some of it, a lot of it, most of it comes from the what is now a nine-figure annual TV rights deal that all SEC schools get. And I mean, that is a tremendous amount of money to work with. The the money in the past has all been dumped into things that they felt could give Alabama an advantage when it comes to recruiting athletes, and that's building facilities. That is building out, in many cases, academic programs too. But in general, making the place as attractive as possible to talent, because you can't give the money directly to the talent. And we've now reached a point where you can give the money directly to the talent, and they care a lot more about getting money than they care about all of these things that Alabama spent years and years building up an advantage in. I would say that, I mean, you don't want to say it was a waste, because Alabama did win many championships and they had an advantage for a lot of years. I would say Alabama's facilities are still pretty far ahead of most of their competitors, including Georgia, who you mentioned earlier. Georgia is bringing in more money than Alabama and seeming to have not as many financial difficulties right now. But I mean, in terms of the difference in facilities, Georgia's way behind Alabama. The issue is that things changed so quickly and completely that advantage that Alabama had spent so much money on really is not worth a lot anymore. And I think they're panicking in terms of finding a way to fill the gap, and shift into being a model that can bring in and generate money with which to pay athletes to come to this school and stay at this school. That's where the gap is right now. And look, I think it's a real test for every athletic director, but Greg Byrne is from a time in college athletics where you did it the old way, and he was great at it. And now it takes completely different things to be great at it. So the question is, can Greg Byrne figure out how to be successful in this new model? And right now, his solution seems to be, maybe I can get everyone else to bail me out on this, instead of perhaps Greg Byrne going through the finances of this athletic department and figuring out, are there places where we're being wasteful with our money? Are there ways for us to bring in more than we're bringing in right now? I think it's going to take some hard decisions being made, but I think he might be trying to avoid making some of those hard decisions by saying, "Hey, could you guys just give us the money that we need?"
I mean, look, he's being honest about the fact that, as you just said, they're going to have to make some difficult decisions. But he also said, "quote As much as sometimes people think we have an unlimited supply of money, there are limited resources." Unquote, and that's obviously including in Tuscaloosa at Alabama, where I think like the perception is, like he said, Alabama just has more money than they know what to do with, and that's obviously not true in this age. And look, it's difficult, like when you're essentially running a business, right? Where you have to create incentives for people to pay for something that used to be free in the recent past. Things like A Day, right? A Day is coming up, and admission will still be free. But to help support this cause, Alabama is letting fans pay for certain perks that they can enjoy, like field level suites or like locker room tours, or the most ridiculous to me is a front row seat at A Day's Walk of Champions that has always been first come first serve to dedicated fans who
Sure.
want a front row seat to something like that. So it's
And
all
by
a
the
little
way,
bit silly.
all those things you're paying for is, we're not even going to do the event anymore. We're not even doing A Day anymore. We're just going to have the guys like do some drills and have a practice in Bryant Denny, and everybody can come and watch it. So not only are we charging you more, you're getting less. You're getting less for your money. And I think that's, look, that is not confined to college athletics, and certainly not to Alabama. But I think there is public sentiment that people are tired of being squeezed. People are tired of being charged more money and getting less for it. And I mean, look, I'm not an economist, but I would say there's a lot of talk out there right now that things are not trending in a great direction. People may have even less expendable income over the next year or so to do things like going to very expensive college football games and buying merchandise while they're there. So I just think I think that Greg Byrne is barking up the wrong tree when it comes to trying to look for additional revenue. I don't think the general public is the place to get it from.
They get to read a blog, Matt. If they send this money, they get to read a blog or in press releases before they get shared on Twitter, before anybody else can see them. And you say they're getting less for what they're paying. They're getting nothing in many cases, right? You said the
Sure.
phrase "a warm feeling in their heart." Nothing. So we're in an age now where I
No,
don't
it's
think
true.
that
You
this has
used to
happened
be
at Alabama.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I mean, I the booster culture at Alabama, I mean, the reason you would give money in large part is because you got access to the program that you couldn't get otherwise. You got to go listen to the coach talk on Saturday mornings before the game. You got to go to dinners where coaches would come and speak. And that's bare minimum. That's just for even making a donation and being part of the sort of fundraising arm. And I get that demand for that stuff is higher, and so the bar for entry is going to go higher too. But I really do think it's that combination of asking for more and more money and giving less and less in return. And we've seen it happen again, like with all businesses. Nothing is completely invincible. No business is invincible. No professional sports team is invincible. If you don't think professional sports teams can die, go check out the Oakland Athletics. Okay, but I mean they left the town. The city lost their team because the organization just stopped caring whether people were getting anything for their money or not. And I think it is possible for a college sports team to ostracize its fan base. I mean, it's not something we've seen much of, many examples of in recent past, but we're entering a very new era, and I think it is something that these schools need to be worried about, and I think they take their fans' passion for granted.
And this is the most passionate fan base. I mean, these are fans uh, under normal circumstances who would do anything for Alabama football, and they have. They've invested everything into Alabama football. Like I said already, for most of their lives, and I don't mean just financial. I mean psychological.
Sure.
They've invested their identities into this. Alabama football means everything to a lot of people. There are people who probably have grown and built businesses themselves that are related and have had to create livelihoods as a result of Alabama that depend on Alabama football. So they have much more invested in this than a lot of people I think realize. But I mean, Matt, like I don't think that this has specifically happened at Alabama, but like we're in uncharted territory where we've seen it a little bit. Where you're paying recruits to come visit, you're paying recruits to sign, and before they even step on the field and or practice or even play a game, they're transferring already, and that money's gone. And so you're asking fans to donate money to this cause where it just gets swallowed up, right? And there's no ROI for a lot of the fans, and that's true for the school too. But right, that's the business that they're in, and they obviously need help navigating it. But Matt, like, I wonder, did you see this news that during the 2025 season, Coastal Carolina will become the first FBS program in the country to offer free concessions at games? I don't know if you saw this
I
story.
did see this. I mean,
So
I think, and look, everybody's got different needs, and I think if you're a small program like that has trouble filling your stands, um, it makes sense maybe. Like, look, ultimately, concessions don't actually cost that much money, believe it or not. For people who aren't aware, like when you're paying $30 for your armful of food that you get at Bryant Denny Stadium, probably cost the people who sold it to you somewhere in the neighborhood of 50 cents all put together.
yeah,
But it's like look, Alabama doesn't have a problem right now with putting butts in the seats at games. That doesn't mean that it's impossible and that it could never happen. There are very proud programs that don't sell out games anymore and have empty seats in their stadiums. I could point to Miami. I could point to Florida State last year. I think it's not impossible to fail. And I think some of the decisions being made seem to be under the assumption that it is impossible for them to fail.
Well,
But you're right. You mentioned a second ago, Ben, that some of this is outside of Alabama's control, and you're right. This is an environment where things have lost their balance, and things were very far one way for a long time. The schools had all the power, and now they have maybe arguably an unhealthy deficiency of power. And I think somebody needs to step up and start show some leadership in terms of coming up with a solution to this that works for everybody and creates stability in college sports. But right now, there are still so many people involved that, for one reason or another, cannot stomach the idea of admitting that these athletes are employees. I mean, ultimately, it's because they don't want to give them labor protection. That's
yeah,
why.
it's apples and oranges here with Coastal Carolina and Alabama. I just want to point this out, just as like a fan of sports. If I'm going to a stadium to catch a game, this would be a pretty interesting incentive. I mean, it does say that the average attendance for a Coastal Carolina football game was a little more than 21,000 during the 2024 season. Obviously, very different than a guaranteed 100,000 plus in
Mhm.
Bryant Denny Stadium, right? But they make about, I think, in the neighborhood of like $250,000 per game on concessions. The report says that a fan who buys a ticket to the game, this is an ESPN report, will be able to select up to 4 items per concession stand visit. Menu selection that includes hot dogs, nachos, popcorn, and fountain drinks. There is no limit to how many visits fans can make to the concession stands, but
it
they have to scan an app each time. Matt, we're not betting men here, but I wonder what odds do you give Alabama ever doing anything like this in Bryant Denny Stadium in our lifetime?
Never, but they I mean, like, look, it's probably, I mean, you said it costs like $250,000 a game uh for concessions. I mean, the amount of marketing they're going to get out of this, I don't think that's a crazy amount to spend on marketing your event, and you're still not guaranteed to get people to come, even if you were running billboards and promotions. People are going to show up for this. People are going to buy tickets to do that. And look, Alabama, I don't think has had problems getting people to show up to any of their events. I mean, you would know better than me, Ben, what the if the non-conference basketball attendance a little bit better this year after that Final Four run?
I think it was roughly the same. I don't know the number, but I mean, I think the interest is generally higher.
Sure. I mean, what I think is the issue is a long-term one when we talk about the value of this experience. Right now, it's not hard for Alabama to fill the stands, but you don't do everything for right now. Sometimes you make some decisions because you're building for the future. And I think Alabama's been great at that in the past. I think they've done a wonderful job of keeping all of their stadiums up to date and looking great and in good condition, which a lot of other SEC schools don't do. But the experience needs to be fun and it needs to be unforgettable. And that's how you make sure that the people who are coming to games right now as kids with their parents grow up and bring their kids to games. And if they're not having a good time, if they're not able to come to very many games because their parents can't afford the extra tickets to bring their kids, if they can't get concessions while they're there because their parents need to find a way to save some money when they come to this incredibly expensive event, they're not going to enjoy it as much. And I mean, I think, Ben, people like you and me who have grown up going to these games, part of the reason why we want to keep going to them and why we still care about them is because we had a good time doing this when we were kids. So I think you have to show some foresight in getting people to care about going to a game. And I think there's a little too much short term profit motivation right now, and not enough looking towards. We have to actually put in some effort to make sure that there is a future of this fan base and that it's just as passionate as the fans we have now.
You're right. I mean, listen, it's really tricky, and what you want to do is enhance the fan experience, and that's what they're going to tell you that they're doing, or at least what they're trying to do. But things like this aren't doing it. And if you're asking fans, a family, one fan, whatever, to spend $100 and something on a ticket, to fill up their car with gas, to drive to the game, to pay for parking, to pay for hotel if they don't have anywhere else to stay, to pay and pay, to tailgate, to pay and pay and pay and pay, right? Then why are you squeezing them $18 per pretzel in Bryant Denny Stadium? Why are you squeezing them $12 per beer, right? $7 per hot dog, right? Like, nobody expects Alabama to make concessions free, and that's not necessarily the point. But use that word again, squeeze. You're squeezing people, and you're not enhancing the experience, and you're not giving them incentive to come back. And if you're going to charge them for this, and you're going to charge them for that, and you're going to make them pay $18 for a pretzel, give them a little bit more than a blog, is what I would say. So,
Yeah,
Matt,
I'm with you, Ben. I'm with you.
in other news, Matt, as they say in the business, former Alabama defensive coordinator and former Tennessee head coach, I should say, Jeremy Pruitt, recently filed a $100 million lawsuit in Alabama, I should say, but he filed it against the NCAA. Pruitt is suing for lost wages, according to documents obtained by Yahoo Sports. He claims that the NCAA, quote, conspired with Tennessee to make him a, quote, sacrificial lamb for rules violations. Pruitt was fired from Tennessee in 2021. He received a 6-year show cause order. That's always a bad word if you're a coach or wanting to coach, for what the NCAA Committee of Infractions termed aggravated violations during his tenure at Tennessee anyway. As reported by AL.com, Pruitt, several members of his volunteer staff, were charged with 18 NCAA violations that included more than 200 individual infractions involving 29 recruits and their families, 10 active players that occurred from 2018 to 2020. But Pruitt claims Tennessee was illegally paying players before he ever got to Knoxville. He also claims to have reported violations in 2017 to then athletics director Philip Fulmer. I'll pause for the hissing from the folks who are listening in our audience. But according to Yahoo, Fulmer told Pruitt that he would, quote, he would handle it, according to the complaint, right? So Pruitt argues that the NCAA applied rules against him in 2023 that had essentially been abolished in 2021 by the U.S. Supreme Court ruling. Matt, regardless of any of this, Jeremy Pruitt is a guy, for better or worse, that Alabama fans would welcome back in a heartbeat if the rules allowed him to do that. Fair or foul, that's just the reality of it. Do you feel for Jeremy Pruitt here at all, or did he kind of make his own bed?
It's a weird situation. I mean, I think that I can see the side of this where you say, look, the thing that I'm like in trouble forever for now was made fully legal like a year or two after I did it. And not only that, but the only reason I did it is because my employer, who was complicit in it, threw me under the bus to help to save themselves from disaster. So I understand all of that. Unfortunately for Jeremy Pruitt, I think it comes down to the question of, yeah, but did you do it? And he did do it, and it was against the rules when he did it, and he knew that. So like, you kind of don't have a leg to stand on here, man. I certainly admire and appreciate that he's now throwing Tennessee under the bus with, I assume, no hard evidence whatsoever. But it's ultimately you knew that you couldn't do that stuff when you did it. And so like, you kind of have to pay the piper now. Like, we're not going back and and unpunishing all the people who were given NCAA sanctions back when this stuff was illegal. It doesn't go like in reverse when we change these rules. So I mean, I feel for him a little bit, but also this was 100%. He knew what he did, and he knew that he wasn't supposed to do it.
Well, regardless of the outcome here, Matt, I mean, if whether or not he gets the $100 million he's suing the NCAA for, which he probably won't.
That's a
Like
lot
I
of
said, Alabama
asparagus.
fans would probably take him back in a heartbeat. You know,
I mean,
um,
I
it's
think I think they're in. Look, I think Alabama's in like a decent place right now, defensive coordinator wise. I think they feel
yeah,
pretty good about the defense right now. But yeah, I mean, Jeremy Pruitt was one of Saban's best recruiters. He was a great defensive coordinator. He knew the state really well, which I think couldn't hurt on this staff of guys from the Pacific Northwest that's currently running the show in Tuscaloosa. So, I mean, I think if they, in the old days, we would have said this is a great candidate for one of those analyst positions on the staff.
yeah. Always love a good new analyst who will eventually be a coordinator or a
That's
head
right.
coach somewhere else in college football. You think Jeremy Pruitt probably still lights up a cigar if and when Alabama beats Tennessee?
I think so. I think he's I think he's a Bama guy. I think he's still and honestly, if anything, probably more so now rooting for Alabama in the third Saturday in October.
He probably lit one up when he coached against Alabama and lost each of those games. Okay, Matt, you know what this episode really meant? There's not much happening in sports right now, right? Basketball season, it's over. It's a long road until football season, but we're going to get everybody there safe and sound. Matt, thanks as always for doing this.
Yeah, thanks, Ben.
All right. Our thanks to Beat Everyone producer Matt Scalici, who joined us here, as well as producer John Hammondtree. You can find Beat Everyone on YouTube, Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. And we want to once again, congrats to our friend Michael Casagrande. I'm Ben Flanagan. We'll see you next time.